under the sinking sun of a late western afternoon. The wagon wheels rolled through dust thick as sorrow, carrying a girl who had no reason left to hope. Mabel sat at its edge, her small hands clutching a worn satchel as the wind pulled loose strands of chestnut hair across her pale cheeks. The prairie stretched endlessly around her, a wide silence broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. She had been sent to a cowboy's ranch, not out of mercy, but mockery. The girls at the boarding house laughed when they wrote the letter to the rancher, saying no man as proud and lonesome as Leland Carter would keep a timid girl like her longer than a day. The driver didn't even say goodbye when he dropped her off before the weathered gate. The cart turned, vanishing down the long trail, leaving her standing before a ranch too quiet to seem kind. The house was modest, its boards faded by sun and years. A lone horse stood tied by the barn, tail swishing against the flies. Smoke drifted softly from the chimney. Somewhere inside, a man was moving, slow, deliberate, the sound of boots on wooden floors echoing faintly through the open window. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and knocked. The door opened. He stood framed in the evening light, tall, broad, with eyes the color of worn leather, and a beard that didn't hide the tiredness of his face. 34 years of wind and loss had carved their lines deep. For a moment, neither spoke. He seemed almost startled to see her there, a small thing against the wide horizon. "I was sent from town," she said softly, voice barely carrying over the wind. "They told me you needed help around the place." He looked her over once, not unkindly, but cautious, as if expecting another cruel trick from the world. After a long pause, he stepped aside. "If they sent you, I suppose I won't turn you back to the dark. Come in then." She crossed the threshold. The room smelled faintly of coffee and solitude. A rifle leaned against the mantel, and the table bore the marks of years of silent meals. Mabel placed her satchel by the wall and glanced around. Everything was neat but lifeless, the kind of order that comes from someone who stopped expecting company long ago. He said his name was Leland, though most in town already knew him, the rancher who kept to himself since his younger brother's death 2 winters back. They said he used to laugh once, before the accident. Now he spoke like a man who had nothing left to say. She started working the next morning. Her hands were clumsy at first, knocking over a pail, burning her fingers on the stove, but she never complained. Leland watched her quietly from the porch as she swept, hung linens, and tried her best to cook something that smelled of warmth. In her presence, the silence in his house began to sound less like loneliness and more like rest. Days passed. She moved gently through his world, stitching torn shirts, feeding the mare, humming little tunes under her breath. She didn't speak of herself much. He didn't ask. Yet, little by little, the space between them filled with something unspoken. When she laughed once, a small, startled laugh at a chicken running off with a piece of bread, Leland felt it like sunlight breaking through a storm. Old Martha, the neighbor who came by once a week with supplies, noticed first. "You're looking alive again, boy," she teased, tossing him a sack of flour. "The house smells like peace." Leland only grunted, but that night, while Mabel sat sewing by the fire, he found himself watching her hands, the way her fingers moved carefully, tenderly, as though each stitch mattered. He started to ask her small things, nothing grand. "What's your favorite season? What books did you read as a girl?" She answered with shy honesty, sometimes looking away when her words caught in her throat. She told him she once dreamed of teaching, of standing in front of children with open books and open hearts, but people had said she wasn't bright enough, that she'd be better off cleaning after others. Her voice trembled when she said it, but Leland heard no weakness there, only quiet strength. One afternoon, clouds began gathering from the north, rolling heavy and dark. Mabel rushed to gather laundry off the line before the rain came. The wind grew wild, snatching at her skirt, tangling her hair. She reached for the last sheet just as the first thunder cracked across the sky. Leland came running from the barn, shouting for her to leave it. She turned, startled, and slipped in the mud. He caught her before she fell, his arms firm around her, the rain bursting down in cold sheets. For a heartbeat, they stood under the barn roof, breathless and close, water dripping from their faces. Neither spoke. The storm raged, but inside that silence was a calm so deep it frightened them both. That night, he sat by the fire, staring into the flames. She brought him a mug of coffee, her hands trembling slightly. He thanked her, his voice low. "You're kind, Mabel. Too kind for a place like this." She smiled faintly, setting the mug down. Maybe kindness belongs in places that forget it. The next morning, she went into town for flour. Near the general store, she heard laughter. Harsh, cruel, unmistakable. Two ranch hands leaned against a fence, speaking loud enough for her to hear. So the Carter Ranch really took her in? Poor man, must be desperate. She was sent as a joke, you know. They said he'd kick her out in a day. Guess he's lonelier than we thought. Her blood ran cold. The laughter followed her all the way down the street. She didn't buy the flour. She walked back to the ranch, every step heavier than the last. By the time the house came into view, her eyes burned with humiliation. She wondered if Leland had known all along, if her whole stay had been pity disguised as mercy. That evening, while the sun bled orange over the hills, she packed her small bag. The sounds of the ranch, the horses, the creaking windmill, seemed to echo like a farewell. When Leland stepped inside, she was standing by the door, shawl drawn tight, tears drying on her face. "Going somewhere?" he asked, voice roughened by confusion. "I should have known better," she said quietly. "You don't have to keep me out of pity. I know what they said in town. I was a joke, a dare." His expression changed, not anger, but pain, deep and startled. He stepped closer, his boots heavy against the wood. "You think I'd let them decide who stays under my roof?" She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. "I think you felt sorry for me." He shook his head, slow, deliberate. "No. I thought you were sent by the same kind of cruelty that's been haunting me for years. I almost sent you away that first night. But then you stayed. And everything that was dead in this house started breathing again." Her lips parted, words lost between disbelief and hope. The fire flickered, casting gold across his face. He took a step nearer, his voice trembling now, stripped of pride. "You were never a joke, Mabel. You were the first real thing that's happened to me since the world stopped making sense. You patched my shirts, but you also patched something I didn't think could mend. You gave this place a heartbeat." Her tears broke loose, falling silently. He reached out, his rough fingers brushing against her hands. "I don't know how to say it fancy," he continued, voice unsteady. "But I've fallen in love with you. Plain and sure. Not because I'm lonely. Because you're the first person who made me feel like living again." Mabel's breath caught. For a long moment, all she could hear was the wind at the window, soft and trembling like her heart. "I never thought anyone would say that to me," she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "Then let me be the first, and not the last," he said. His thumb brushed away the tear that clung to her cheek. The closeness between them felt both fragile and eternal, the kind of moment that could change the shape of two lives. Outside, rain began again, gentle this time, like forgiveness. She leaned her forehead against his chest, her sobs quiet and full of release. His arms folded around her, steady and certain, as if they had been waiting there all along. The fire snapped softly beside them. The house no longer felt hollow. It pulsed with warmth, with life, with the promise of something new born from old pain. And far beyond the ranch, the prairie breathed, wide, endless, forgiving. Sometimes, the cruelest jokes of men become the gentle beginnings of grace. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with thunder, but with a woman's quiet footsteps, and the way she sets a cup of coffee beside a lonely man. If you felt the stir of something true in their story, linger a moment. Tell me, from where do you watch tonight? Have you ever seen love bloom where it was never meant to grow? Like, share and stay a while under this wide western sky. There are more hearts yet to be found where kindness takes root in the dust.